have our next speaker? Yes, we do. I see him in there. Let's get Steve O'Loughlin on. He's the CFO of Actinium Pharmaceuticals. There he is. Steve, how are we doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Let me make sure we have your slides. Yes, we do. Let's get the slides up on the screen, and I will turn it over, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, it's great to be back. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on Actinium Pharmaceuticals progress. Before I begin, just disclaimer and safe harbor, as I may be making forward-looking statements in today's presentation, which encourage everyone to reference our SEC filings as they may be updated and amended from time to time. So Actinium is a company focused on advancing a pipeline of what we believe are differentiated targeted radiotherapies. Radiotherapy has emerged of late as an area of significant interest. There's been a number of products approved that are doing well commercially. There's been a number of new companies formed. We believe we have a highly differentiated pipeline, which is led by our lead asset, IMAB-B. We recently completed enrollment of a pivotal phase 3 trial, Sierra, which we're excited about. We expect to have a data update in the fourth quarter of this year from that phase 3 trial, with top-line data expected in mid-2022. IMAB is intended to condition patients for a bone marrow transplant. We've leveraged that to create a targeted conditioning franchise to not only address the needs of patients seeking a bone marrow transplant, but also CAR T and gene therapy, which are large and rapidly growing methodologies. We're far from a one-trick pony. We also have our Actimab-A clinical program that's being studied in 2 ongoing phase 1 trials, and we have some exciting future opportunities with that as well. And underpinning all of our clinical programs is our AUD technology platform, which I'll speak about in a little bit. This is supported by a strong balance sheet, over $80 million in cash as of June 30th, 2021, which provides several years of operating runway and gets us through several key milestones. So our AUD technology platform really relies around the ability to create targeted radiotherapies. We have demonstrated an ability to work with multiple targets as well as multiple isotopes. And this is backed by over 160 patents. Our patent portfolio has been growing, and we expect it to continue to grow. Our platform is also being utilized in a research collaboration with Astellas Pharmaceuticals, a top 20 global pharmaceutical company, who's using it to create theranostics, which leverages radiotherapy's ability to both image, to diagnose and identify cancer, and then treat it. And our technology platform, largely around the ability to work with the isotope actinium-225, is being used in this collaboration for therapeutic purposes. So looking at the pipeline, what we're excited about is our active ongoing clinical trials have all made significant progress this year. As I mentioned, the phase 3 Sierra trial is fully enrolled. There will be a data update by year end, and also with our 2 ongoing Actimab-A combination trials. We expect to provide data updates from both of those also before year end, so some upcoming milestones in the near term. IMAB-B, our lead asset, targets something called CD45. And to our knowledge, we're the only clinical stage CD45 targeting agent in development. We like CD45 because it's expressed on all blood cancer cells, but it's also expressed on immune cells and bone marrow stem cells. And that allows us to use this for potentially bone marrow transplant conditioning, gene therapy, and also CAR T. CD45, I won't get into all the specifics, but it does not internalize. It's not involved in a lot of biological processes. So as a result of that, we think that our targeted radiotherapy approach, what we call ARC, antibody radiation conjugate, is ideal because we're able to kill the targeted cells by leveraging the energy that is emitted from radioisotopes. So I've spoken about conditioning, and we think that there is a very large unmet medical need here, and in turn, a large market opportunity. So currently today, if a patient needs a bone marrow transplant or CAR T therapy or gene therapy, which in some cases, such as a bone marrow transplant, may be the only curative treatment option for the patients. They have to receive combinations of chemotherapy and external radiation. These are non-targeted. They're associated with a lot of toxicities. There's a mortality rate associated with these. And as a result, we believe it is hindering patient outcomes and also access to these potentially curative treatment options. And in the case of bone marrow transplant, we estimate that there's potentially over 150,000 patients who are not able to access bone marrow transplant today, who could be able to with our targeted conditioning regimens. So to get into the specifics of IMAB, we licensed this from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, Washington. They're a pioneer in the field of bone marrow transplant. And before we licensed IMAB, it had been studied in several hundred patients in multiple clinical trials in multiple disease indications, and consistently showed a improvement in outcomes, which compelled us to license this therapy. We elected to advance this in patients with acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. We felt that was the highest unmet need, and also that there was a large patient population. So what we were struck by with IMAB was, if you look to the bars on the right, patients who got IMAB and a bone marrow transplant saw 1 year overall survival of 30% in this particular study that we reference here. And in 2 years, nearly 20% of patients were still alive. In AML, if a patient receives a bone marrow transplant and is disease-free 2 years after a transplant, they're technically considered medically cured. If you contrast that to what's currently used today, which is either chemotherapy in a salvage setting, or in very select cases, chemotherapy followed by a bone marrow transplant, these patients have very poor outcomes. It's really dismal. Overall survival is typically measured in only a handful of months, and many patients simply just cannot access a transplant because of the conditioning. So we took the results of that study and the other data from Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and we met with the FDA and designed what is the pivotal phase 3 Sierra trial. It was a 150-patient study. We completed enrollment in September, so just last month. And Sierra is really designed to study outcomes of patients who either receive IMAB in a transplant or patients who get physician's choice of salvage therapy. There is no standard of care in this patient population. There's over 20 drug regimens that were permissible in the salvage therapy arm or the control arm, including some of the most recently approved targeted therapies. And the primary outcome endpoint of this study is 6 months durable complete remission. We're very proud of the fact that the Sierra trial was conducted at 24 of the leading bone marrow transplant centers in North America, including sites such as MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the Mayo Clinic, who lead in volume of bone marrow transplants performed. And I'll get back to that when I speak about the commercial opportunity here. Last year and the beginning of this year, we were able to present data from the first 75% of patients enrolled on the Sierra trial. You can see that data here. And if you look at the middle column, BMT engraftment, what really excites us about Sierra and IMAB is that all patients, 100% of patients who got therapeutic dose of IMAB were able to go on to a transplant and engraft, which is the first sign of success. They were able to access transplant rapidly in 30 days, and engraftment occurred without delay. If you contrast that to the bottom of this column, which you see in the gray, patients who received salvage therapy in the control arm, only 18% of patients were able to go on to transplant. And the way that the study is designed, to say that another way, 82% of patients on the control arm failed for the primary endpoint of 6 months durable remission. In addition to higher rates of bone marrow transplant access and engraftment, there were lower rates of serious adverse events in patients receiving IMAB, including adverse events like mucositis and febrile neutropenia. In addition, there was lower 100-day non-relapse transplant-related mortality of 4% in the IMAB arm compared to 20% in the control arm. So as a result of that, there's a potentially greater than 5x difference in the number of patients potentially evaluable for the primary endpoint in the Sierra study. So we're very excited about these results thus far. We're excited that they've been consistent with the results from Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and we look forward to reporting on additional data from this study. And just looking ahead, as I mentioned, we do expect to provide a data update before the end of the year in the fourth quarter, and then top-line data on the primary endpoint expected in the middle of 2022. So I mentioned that Sierra was conducted in several leading transplant centers, and one of the things that excites us about the market opportunity is that it's highly concentrated. The top 30 centers do about 50% of the transplant volume, and there's about 50 centers that do 75% of the transplant volume. Transplant is expected to grow both in the US and internationally, Europe and Japan. And IMAB is potentially applicable to not only AML, but many, many other blood cancers, as well as moving beyond bone marrow transplant into CAR T and gene therapy. And to that end, we do have a clinical collaboration ongoing with Memorial Sloan Kettering that was awarded NIH grant funding that is studying IMAB at lower doses in combination with CAR T therapy that was developed by Sloan Kettering. This trial is ongoing, and we expect to provide proof of concept data in the near future. Just moving on to our other clinical program, ActimAb-A. This utilizes the alpha-emitting radioisotope actinium-225. We're a leader. We have a significant amount of clinical data with this construct, over 125 patients. We've studied this as a single agent where it demonstrated response rates as high as 69%, which were very encouraging to us. We think that there's several mechanistic synergies with Actimab. We're currently studying it with chemotherapy and targeted agents, and I'll highlight those ongoing studies in just a moment. But we believe there's several future opportunities, including with immunotherapy and cellular therapy. So one clinical trial that we're conducting is a combination with Actimab-A and the salvage chemotherapy CLAG-M. This is in relapse refractory AML patients who are fit for intensive therapy. At the last dosing cohort of 0.75, all patients had a remission, and overall across the study, of all the patients who did achieve a remission, 70% of them were MRD negative, meaning they had no detectable cancer. Very excited about these results. Look forward to providing an update from this phase 1 trial before the end of the year. We're also exploring a combination with Actimab-A and venetoclax, which is a BCL2 inhibitor. This is an approved drug that's being developed and owned by AbbVie and Roche. In the first dosing cohort, there was a 67% response rate, including one remission. This was at a low dose of Actimab-A that was shown to be subtherapeutic as a single agent. We're very encouraged by the remission in the one patient who had adverse cytogenetics, including a TP53 mutation, which is associated with very poor outcomes. We've been in dose escalation on this study and expect to provide an update also before the end of the year. So when we look at Actimab-A and CLAG-M for the fit patient population and Actimab-A plus venetoclax for the unfit population, we think we are starting to build out a potentially backbone therapy with Actimab-A and AML that can address the high unmet needs of patients with relapsed and refractory disease. And then when we look at a holistic portfolio view of Actimab and IMAB targeting relapsed refractory AML, we think this is a potential to build a franchise that will be targeting a patient population that is treated in the top 100 cancer centers in the United States. So a concentrated call point and a portfolio of targeted radiotherapies that can address both therapeutic and conditioning needs of these patients. So to conclude, as I mentioned, we do have a strong balance sheet with over $80 million at the end of the second quarter. That is expected to carry us through several significant milestones, including top-line data on the phase 3 Sierra trial for IMAB-B. We do expect to be able to file BLA for approval by the end of next year. Proof of concept data in CAR T and gene therapy settings with our IMAB-ACT program, low-dose IMAB-B, and then provide updates on our ongoing phase 1 Actimab-A trials, as well as continuing to advance our AUT technology platform, including our ongoing research collaboration with Astellas, but then also initiate other opportunities to leverage our technology platform. So thank you everyone for your attention today. Hope you continue to follow Actinium and our progress, which we expect to be significant over the coming months. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Yeah, Steve, if you could boil down that presentation, everything you said, into one thing, one fact,
yes,
one whatever, what would it be?
I think it's that we have a highly differentiated pipeline of targeted radiotherapies led by a phase 3 program that has completed enrollment and will have top-line phase 3 data in the middle of next year.
All right, that was very succinct. Thank you. Steve O'Loughlin, CFO of Actinium Pharmaceuticals, ticker up on the screen, ATNM. Steve, a pleasure as always. Thanks for joining us today at the Benzinga Small Cap Conference, and have a good rest of your day, and good luck. We'll keep tabs on you guys.
Thank you very much. Great to be back. Look forward to coming back in the near future.